I received a review code for Disaster Arms Impact Project Bond, which is a short and sweet 2D indie run-and-gun game that wears its Alien Soldier influence on its sleeve. Now, unfortunately, I got COVID toward the end of the review period. Cough unrelated. So I couldn't get anything out in time, but I felt sort of bad. I wasn't sure, okay, are my thoughts even that interesting? Do I have that much to say? I don't know. But I feel like if I'm gonna review other games on this channel, I should at least review this game that I received a review code for. So there you go. I'm a massive fan of Alien Soldier. I haven't formally covered it on this channel. It's actually something that I would like to cover here soon, so let me know if you want to see that. But from that perspective, I can say that if you're a fan of Alien Soldier, Disaster Arms is the most I've seen a game hit on all the major checklist items and all the major notes. The camera is relatively close, the pace of the game is very brisk, it's very boss fight focused, you could consider it sort of a boss rush, with these interstitial sections where you do encounter smaller and weaker enemies. However, the relevance of those sections is that they provide room for the player to make errors, and then for those errors to compound over the course of the playthrough, specifically in the boss fights. There's also a big chunky dash, which is your most powerful attack that you can use. And I want to say just from that, in terms of energy and spirit, yes, the games are very comparable. However, there is, I think, a significant difference in terms of general design ethos. I'm not familiar with the developer's previous work, however, I would characterize it, or I think it's safe to characterize this game, as very much shmup adjacent. There's a big emphasis on dense bullet patterns that you have to weave through pretty carefully, and one of your major moves is this gigantic punch that you can use to clear certain types of bullets off of the screen. Again, it's sort of comparable to the Alien Soldier melee attack, which in that game kind of functions as a parry. You send projectiles back to the attacker. And there's an interesting consideration in the fact that doing this maneuver will knock you back a couple pixels. The same thing happens in Disaster Arms. However, then Disaster Arms also says, okay, if you get in close and use the punch, you can actually use it as an effective melee tool. And I think that plays pretty effectively into the positional shmup nature of the game. Not only do you want to weave through the bullets to defend yourself, but also to hopefully find a path forward and then smack the enemy in the face. So one of the reasons I kind of struggled with this review and with wanting to put it out is that while playing, I just couldn't help but compare the two games constantly, and in every instance, prefer Alien Soldier. On the one hand, the comparison is kind of distractingly obvious, and maybe for that reason kind of valid. But on the other hand, I did also get this deep sense, okay, maybe I'm doing this game a disservice by constantly connecting every even slightly analogous part to this other, much older game that I have this deep affection for. As evidenced by this review that you're currently watching, I haven't gotten over this comparison. I haven't really developed a way to analyze the game that doesn't lean on this comparison. So let me just embrace it and let me get deeper into it. One of the things that I've found most interesting about Alien Soldier is its emphasis on very mobile, very modular bosses. One of the biggest innovations in Alien Soldier, I would argue, was the fact that almost all of the bosses consist of multiple moving parts that can operate to a pretty big extent independently of each other. And that was on a system that really wasn't built for this sort of thing. We were not in the era of sprite rotation, sprite scaling yet, and yet they still went for it anyway. And that's on top of bosses that feel like, wow, they use the entire arena, they're constantly moving back and forth. And that gave the game this very intoxicating mix of constantly surprising you with these really dense, intricate set pieces that kind of test your knowledge of the game, while also never really becoming trite with repetition. They're always just dynamic enough that I enjoy replaying them a lot. In Disaster Arms, I want to say that duty is relegated more so to the bullet patterns. I'm not enough of a shmup expert to really... Well, I'm not a shmup expert at all, I should say. I couldn't really tell you intelligently, okay, how is this design, how does this really work? I did notice, especially on the higher difficulty, the first two modes are basically the same in terms of balancing, except the lowest difficulty gives you infinite retries. The third difficulty is where things actually change, where more and denser stuff comes into play. And I could really tell, wow, okay, they really jacked up the speed, they really jacked up the density of the shit you're faced with. However, again, as someone who's like struggled a little bit to get hooked on a shmup, it just didn't grab me the same way that an Alien Soldier boss kind of would. There's also a lot of these little things, like, I feel like a lot of the push and pull in something like Alien Soldier came, for example, from the ammo system, where every single weapon uses ammo, and then changing to a different weapon has a hard time penalty. And in a game with this kind of density, and then also a game that has a timer for every single section, that's pretty relevant. There are a bunch of bosses where I'm still at risk of timing out in Alien Soldier. And I'm not saying this would have necessarily suited a game like Disaster Arms. Obviously, they're designed very differently. But again, it was another dynamic I was kind of missing. Now, I will say, again, maybe for as uncharitably I'm comparing the two, I do want to commend Disaster Arms for being such a genuine attempt at a treasure-style game. It really genuinely does have this manic sense of forward momentum and even variety. I don't really want to spoil it, but there are a couple set pieces where they just do very strange, unconventional things that I really enjoyed, and that can even... You would think they're sort of rigid set pieces, but they actually do play out relatively differently depending on what you do, and I enjoyed that. But yeah, I don't know, I just wasn't... It didn't really hook me post-credits. I didn't really get the sense that, wow, I want to really grind this game and learn this game. I want to think Disaster Arms probably scales quite a bit higher than something like Alien Soldier. It seems like it has even more room for mastery, and I definitely commend that. However, it's just not the type of skills that really speak to me, that I really want to dig into. So yeah, pretty good game. I recommend it, but maybe not quite for me. Now, on the off chance that you enjoyed this review and you would like to see me talk in this kind of looser style about other games that hopefully I have more original thoughts on, I currently have reviews up for P.N.O. 3, Metroid Prime 2, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater for both my Ko-fi members and also my YouTube members. So you go either to my Ko-fi page or here on YouTube. You can become a member for $5 a month, and then you will be able to see every review in the style that I've done so far. Also includes stuff like Metal Gear Rising, Monster Hunter Wilds, but also more obscure stuff. Now, I would prefer for you to go to Ko-fi, because that way the money goes to me directly. It doesn't have to go through AdSense first, but both are fine. And yeah, I have more scripted videos in the works. I'm specifically currently planning one on Shadow of the Colossus, similar to my Resident Evil video from a while back. Please watch that if you haven't yet, and I'll see you around.